What's up, guys? Welcome back to another NBA mock draft, and a lot has changed since the last time that we talked. Not only have we now determined the order of the NBA lottery, we've also got to see some of the young stars in action at the NBA Combine. You can never look into the Combine too much, especially in the NBA. This is not the NFL. But with a full year of such uncertainty, good performances definitely will improve the stock of some of the guys down the board, and that will be clearly reflected in this version of my mock draft. You guys always show so much love on these mocks, and it's much appreciated, so we gotta come back strong. With that being said, let's get right into the newest NBA mock draft with the Atlanta Hawks on the clock at number 1 overall. At number 1, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting Alex Sarr, the big man out of Perth. The Atlanta Hawks found themselves in a situation that we just don't see often, grabbing the number 1 overall pick with only a 3% chance. While some say this is the worst class to do so, I actually disagree, and I think Alex Sarr has to be their number 1 option. I don't care if you have a logjam at center. You can't let Clint Capella or Onyeka Okongwu hold you back from a talent like Alex Sarr. At 7'1", you get a unique mix of defensive reliability and athletic upside that you just don't see often. Sarr is one of the best rim defenders in this whole class, but his quickness is what stands out to me, and that's the reason that in this era of positionless basketball, he becomes so valuable. You would hope for a more well-defined offensive game for a number 1 overall pick, I understand, but he has a great face-up game in the mid-range, and I think he has a smooth jumper. So you'd like to think that those are coming along and are going to be strengths of his going forward. I've had Sarr up and down my board throughout the process, but for now, he's my number 1 guy, and if Atlanta holds at number 1, I expect him to be the top prospect in consideration. At number 2, I have the Washington Wizards selecting Zachary Risacher out of JL Bork. The Wizards at pick 2 could do a lot of different things. I don't think they have a cornerstone at any position on their roster, and while I do understand that Deni Avdija and Bilal Coulibaly are a forward pairing that you look to develop going forward, I think the best player on the board is a wing with Zachary Risacher, a guy that honestly could go number 1. Risacher is probably the best shooter in this whole class, and he always is working off ball to get his shots from deep. An underrated aspect of his game that I'm not seeing many point out is his ability in transition. When he's running on the outsides, it seems like he's always finding ways to spot up into good shots, and when he has the ball in his hands in transition, he has creative ball handling and vision to make plays for others. He is not an incredible one-on-one talent, but I think the Wizards can look to develop a guard who could play in that role, whether it's Jordan Poole or eventually someone else at number 1. In the meantime, you take the best player available, and that's got to be Zachary Risacher. At number 3, we have the Houston Rockets on the clock, but first, let's hear a word from our sponsors. Big game, big show, big event where you'll need to snatch up some tickets. Use code NEXTMANUP on SeatGeek for $20 off. That's right, SeatGeek hooked us up, and you can all use code NEXTMANUP to save yourself some money on your next purchase. So support the channel, use code NEXTMANUP on SeatGeek, and save yourself some cash. Thank you, SeatGeek, but for now, back to the Rockets pick, and this is where the draft really gets interesting. At number 3, I have the Houston Rockets selecting Rob Dillingham out of Kentucky. And I'll be honest, Rockets fans never seem to like what I do in these mock drafts, but at number 3, I think you have to at least be interested in Rob Dillingham. The Rockets are one of the more competitive teams picking this early, and adding the scoring burst of Dillingham off their bench has to be a dream come true. Rob has been on people's radar since high school, and a lot of it has to do with that elite ball handling, which in turn creates easy buckets for someone who is as twitchy as Rob is. Most players who shoot the ball like Dillingham tend to have pretty low basketball IQ and play a forced game of ball, but that is not Rob at all. Does he still have the occasional turnover or bad miss because he's doing too much? Sure, but generally I'm impressed with his confidence and feel for the game more than anything, and I have no doubt that after having an instant impact as a 6-man at Kentucky, that he could do the same at the NBA level, and if they need a point guard after Fred VanVleet, I don't see why Rob Dillingham wouldn't be a premier option. At number 4, I have the San Antonio Spurs taking a guy I've been hot on all year, Stephon Castle out of UConn. The Spurs have 2 big tasks to handle this offseason. Get Wemby some help and try to build an identity around your young talent. If I know one thing about Greg Popovich, that identity will probably have something to do with defense. And if I know Wemby, the best way to build around him is to get guys who are just going to give him the ball. Here enters Stephon Castle. At 6'6", I think Castle is a guy that you can get to play as a combo guard, but I really do trust him to run the point and be a true playmaker as well. Castle tends to make smart plays off the ball, which obviously came in handy when he helped UConn win the national championship, and I think getting a guy who won't demand shots to be successful will be huge for San Antonio. You gotta wait on the jumper, it's still coming along, but I like his mechanics there, and his playmaking mixed with his defensive effort and talent is exactly what you want in San Antonio. I think you reach on him a little bit at 4, and he immediately provides a lot of value to your squad. At number 5, I have the Detroit Pistons selecting Matas Buzeles from the G League Ignite. Now, I haven't had Matas this high on my board in a long time, but the more I see the draft shape out, the more I believe that a team will definitely swing at Buzeles early. Now, Matas' game logs are kind of a landmine, as an injury held him back early in the season, and it clearly bothered him once he returned. But once he reached peak form, Matas was just one of the most talented players in this class, there's no doubt. He's a 6'9" wing who could realistically slide in as a 2, 3, or a 4, and his strength is his scoring ability. Matas is a really good spot-up shooter, and I love the way that he moves off ball to get himself into spots that he likes. And although he's not an elite playmaker, I don't think that's what you're looking for out of him, and if I'm Detroit, I just need all the talent I can get. The Pistons are brutal, falling to pick number 5 does not help, and although I like Cunningham and Ivy, the pure scoring potential and the ceiling of the end-to-end talent with Matas' physicals sell me on the idea of drafting him at the 5 spot. I think he's a really solid player, and he's probably the best option on the board for a Pistons team that was hoping they could get the number 1 selection this year. At number 6, I have the Charlotte Hornets selecting the big man out of UConn, Donovan Clingan. After drafting Brandon Miller last year, who of course looked incredible, you're still looking to have LaMelo Ball as your face of the franchise, and when I look in the front court, Mark Williams is having trouble staying on the court. I think you have to go big, and that big is going to be Donovan Clingan. Clingan was the centerpiece of the national championship Huskies in 2024, and he was an anchor on an elite defense at UConn. With his size, he's a great rebounder and has incredible defensive timing to block shots, and in the pick and roll, he's a great lob threat, not just as a dunker, but as an all-around player around the rim. He knows how to finish. He is not a freak athlete for his frame. I'm not convinced he's going to be a stretch 5 in the NBA, despite him trying to show us that at the Combine. But he does all the things you want from a young big man at his size, and Charlotte could use him to be that elite defender by the rim. And even if Mark Williams and Nick Richards stick around, you would have a great defensive front court at all times. I think Clingan might be the best long-term option at this pick, and if him and LaMelo can build some chemistry, that's going to be a dangerous duo, especially with a guy like Brandon Miller on the wing. At number 7, I have the Portland Trailblazers selecting Cody Williams out of Colorado. I'm going to be honest, at one point in this process, I had Cody Williams as my number 1 guy, and if you go back a couple mock drafts, you'll see I have him incredibly high, but this range is where I've started to settle on for the forward out of Colorado. Cody Williams was an incredible shooter from deep this entire season until March, but I do have confidence that he is legit from the 3 range, and he's so difficult to guard because he mixes that deep shooting with a super creative game around the rim, which of course makes him a threat at all levels. Williams doesn't have incredible self-creation, of course, and I think he needs to refine his ball handling to be a more efficient scorer in the league, but we know that he's able to get tough buckets when he has to. The question is more about if he can make things easier for himself as he battles the world's best competition. He was able to make those tough shots in Colorado. In the NBA, those don't fly as easily, but I love the long-term potential of Cody Williams, and I think he could reach that if Portland takes him at 7. At number 8 is the San Antonio Spurs once again. I have them taking Dalton Knecht out of Tennessee. Now, of course, I gave the Spurs more of a developmental high ceiling player earlier with Stephon Castle. Now let's get them someone we know is just going to hoop from day one. Knecht was arguably the most talented player in the country this last basketball season, and it's the versatility of his deep shooting and athleticism that make that the case. Knecht is right up there with Reece Shea for being the best shooter in this class, and his efficiency and volume combination is just lethal. Knecht is also just a great athlete who gets to the hoop and knows how to finish with authority. I don't think his defense is bad, and I mentioned how San Antonio earlier could build a defensive identity, but when Dalton Knecht was at Tennessee, he wasn't exactly the guy you trusted to make big stops. So there were problems there I can acknowledge. With that being said, Knecht is also one of the oldest players in this class, but to me, he is easily one of the most talented, if not the most talented on day one. So at 8, where the Spurs have such little talent in the backcourt, you really just need to get guys you know that can play. I think Knecht can be your day one guy. At number 9, I have the Memphis Grizzlies selecting Ron Holland from the G League Ignite. The Grizzlies are honestly in a fun spot. Obviously, your season was horrible with Ja Morant missing nearly the entirety of it, but now you have a top 10 pick and you're looking to compete next year in the West. You could pick a day one ready guy or shoot on the highest potential player available. I chose the latter option here with Ron Holland. Holland is one of the most electric players in the whole class. He's a high flyer who loves the transition game and can beat his man in the half court if they press too high. He didn't shoot elite for the G League Ignite, but his confidence to pull it makes me confident that guys are going to have to play him honest at the NBA level. With Ja Morant manning the backcourt and shooters like Bane and eventually a guy like GG Jackson on the roster, why not take a wing who could be an athletic freak to go with them? If you checked out my video a few months ago, you know I'm also a huge fan of Vince Williams Jr., but even I can admit that developing a guy like Ron Holland over him makes Memphis a much scarier team for years to come, and I can't lie, a duo of Ja Morant and Ron Holland attacking the rims might be a big man on defense's nightmare. I think Grizzlies fans would love to see that. At number 10, I have Nikola Topic at a Red Star in Serbia. I'm admittedly pretty harsh on Nikola Topic. If this were a player ranking video, he's probably in the mid-20s for me. By the way, I have a big board coming soon, so stay tuned for that. Back to Topic though, I'm confident a team will take a shot on him around the top 10, so let me tell you why. You don't find a 6'6" true point guard often, but that's exactly what Topic is. He's an incredible playmaker who's always looking to make plays for others, especially in the pick and roll game. And he will make you pay if you let him beat him off the dribble. What I worry about though is Topic's separation. He's one of the worst separators in this class, and unless he is beating you downhill to the rim, he's not beating you at all. For a guy like Cody Williams, who I do like quite a bit, I think something like that can be masked by a great wingspan and or elite deep shooting. But for me, Nikola Topic has neither, so that makes me genuinely worry about what he's going to do to score in the NBA. With all of that being said, all of the downsides, I just think Topic's playmaking can coexist with scoring guards like Keontae George and Colin Sexton for the Jazz, and even maybe if he's coming off the bench in year one, that's going to build his confidence to take more shots, which could just be exactly what Topic needs to improve his game. He has the frame, he has elite playmaking, and I know a team is going to take a shot on him early, but I'm sorry Jazz fans, I have to admit, I'm not super in love with the player, but at 10, probably great value. At number 11, I have the Chicago Bulls selecting Reed Sheppard out of Kentucky. Reed Sheppard impressed big time at the Combine, but the ones who have seen his game know that he had bounced like that already. Sheppard is another guy who I'm not incredibly high on, but I definitely see the highlights with his game. Sheppard is just a great shooter. He has great footwork, and for a guy that played an undersized two-guard role, he's an incredible playmaker when he does have the rock in his hands. Sheppard's fundamentals are unmatched, and that's what made him one of the only defensive-oriented players that the Wildcats had last season, which is obviously going to be a strong suit in his draft process. I just worry about his size a lot. He is really small for a 2, and he's not really a true point guard in the modern NBA, and in college, I feel like it was his effort that set him apart from the guys he went up against, and in the NBA, that simply just doesn't matter. Everybody has high effort. I can see him becoming a really solid role player on a team. I can see him being a high volume scorer if he gets a ton of shots, but I don't see him being the star player on a great team. Chicago found luck with his common NBA comparison Kirk Hinrich, and I think he can be a piece in the backcourt as we may be entering the Kobe White era. So I do like the selection, and I really like the fit to Chicago at number 11. At number 12, I have the OKC Thunder selecting Isaiah Collier out of USC. Collier has probably had the most unfair decline in this draft process out of anyone in the entire class. This guy went into USC as a consensus top 5 pick. He struggled early on, battled injuries, and still showcased his strong developmental skills on a team that didn't give him much help outside of Boogie Ellis. I mentioned all that to say that this guy is just so immensely talented, and if the Thunder get him at number 12, it will be another one of their recent great selections. At his best, Collier gives flashback of the OKC legend Russell Westbrook with his high-flying ability and his great basketball IQ in the pick and roll. I didn't forget about Cason Wallace, but I actually think a guy like Collier is the perfect pairing for him off the bench, considering the strides I saw Wallace take as an off-ball player. And honestly, we might see Wallace start next to Shea next season, so I don't think about the fit too much, Thunder fans. With all of that being said, Collier is going to have to work on his loose handle and rush passes, which sometimes lead him to sloppy turnovers. That's what guys don't like from him. And for a high-intensity player, I want to see more on defense. But his immense talent, falling to a championship level team, just doesn't come around often, so if I'm a Thunder, I just have to take that shot. At number 13, I have the Sacramento Kings selecting Jacoby Walter out of Baylor. The Kings came up short in the play-in this year, but I think we all know that under the right circumstances, this team can compete. With Herter having a fall from grace, Vezenkov not having the impact Kings fans had hoped for, as well as him definitely being more of a forward, and a guy like Keon Ellis emerging as a good option, but probably not a franchise cornerstone, the Kings just need a damn 2-guard, and I really like Jacoby Walter. Jacoby is a really smooth scorer. You want footwork with a deadly deep shot? He has it. And you want to talk about a natural off-ball guy who can be deadly with the handles in an ISO possession? I think he has that in his bag as well. Walter is really young though, and I think that reflects on his game. I don't think his defense, especially on the perimeter, is where you hope it would be, and I think he knows that he's a good shooter, which can lead to him having frustrating shot-chucking moments when he is off his game. But at a young age, with the physicals that he possesses, I can see a world where Mike Brown and the Kings look at him as a starting option next to Fox, and with his shooting potential, that makes the Kings even more dangerous on offense. At number 14, the Portland Trailblazers are back on the clock, and I'm going to give them Devin Carter out of Providence. It's not often that I see a 6'3" guard who excels at defense as his #1 priority at 22 years old be a prospect I would consider in the lottery, but this dude Devin Carter is just different. The Derek White comparisons are going to be there, and with Chris Dunn being a notable Providence alum, there's probably a little bit of that there as well. But the suffocating defense from Carter on what feels like every possession is just elite. Unlike those two guys though, I think Carter is a true point guard who excels in the pick and roll. I feel like he's always making the right play to get his team an easy bucket, and he showed his senior year that he can make tough shots when the buckets aren't as easy to come by. The only worry with Carter isn't that this season was a fluke, but maybe it's just the best of what's to come. For a 22-year-old guy, it's really not the most promising when you only really start to show your offensive potential your senior year. But after taking a shot at a project guy like Cody Williams for the Trailblazers earlier, maybe it's in this team's best interest to get a solid force in the backcourt as well. And even for a rookie, being a guy that can help with the development of Scoot Henderson is something that might be in Devin Carter's cards. At number 15, I have the Miami Heat selecting Jared McCain out of Duke. You can never have too much three-point shooting, and I think Miami would definitely agree with that statement, as they would welcome Jared McCain to town with open arms. McCain shines off the ball and falls into the list of the two guards with incredible footwork in this class, but he became a consensus first rounder because of his ability to beat his man off the dribble as well. I won't lie to you guys and say that I want McCain with the ball in his hands in a 1v1 situation, but bigger guards try to pressure him on the perimeter. He's only a couple dribbles away from the rim to get easy buckets, and he developed that skill immensely his freshman year at Duke. McCain is quick and smart, a combination that Eric Spoelstra tends to like from his young players. But if he goes to Miami, he will be drilled on his defensive skills, which just aren't fully there yet. McCain is young, but he also looks to make an impact day one. He gives you a little bit of both. And for a guy like McCain, I think Miami at 15 is about the lowest he'll end up falling in this class. At number 16, I have the Philadelphia 76ers selecting Tajon Salon out of Cholet. I feel like Philly is always a fun team to mock for because they have no problem taking raw, high upside players. Maxi's a star who came from that idea, and young guys like Ricky Council and Terquavion Smith are two high upside players that I liked from last season, so Tajon Salon seems like he'd be on their board. Salon is a 6'9" forward with a 7-foot wingspan and is just a freak of an athlete. His athleticism makes him hard to predict on either end, and unlike a lot of raw, young European guys who decide to come over, his jump shot is not only smooth, but it's incredibly consistent. His size is going to make him a force on defense one day, but the footwork on that end will need some work. Generally, his upside is just huge. His shooting fundamentals are solid, but you're going to need some patience to get everything else going. I think Philly does have the luxury of developing him behind a big-name wing, assuming they can get one in the offseason, and Salon could end up being one of the best players in this whole class if a team like Philly takes the time to just let him work out. I think all the tools are there. At number 17, I have the Los Angeles Lakers selecting Tyler Smith from the G League Ignite. If I were a Laker fan, which if you guys watch the videos, you know I'm definitely not, I would be hyped up to see Tyler Smith fall to me at 17. I think it's a perfect fit. Smith is a 6'11" big with a guard skill set, and that's shown off by his great athleticism, his confidence with the ball, and his confidence to pull up from three at any given occasion. This guy loves to play on the perimeter, and his jump shot is nearly impossible to get a hand on. Remember, he's almost 7 feet tall. As a big, his interior defense and rebounding as a whole just need to get a lot better though. I don't want to judge the guy, but he just doesn't seem engaged a lot of the time on the defensive end. But I want to say that playing on the G League Ignite will do that to you sometimes, so who really knows? What I do know is that if he never becomes a great defender, having Anthony Davis down low will make that a lot less of an issue. And if you can be a player with elite size and the ability to make any matchup on you a defensive mismatch, Los Angeles would love to bring you in, so I think Tyler Smith would easily be the guy at 17. At number 18, I have the Orlando Magic selecting Terrence Shannon out of Illinois. The Magic struggled in the playoffs to get points on the board. It's as simple as that. You can blame it on Franz Wagner having a tough run. You can blame it on their system probably not being the best. But in my opinion, I think they just need some more pieces. Shannon is a guard who would probably switch to be more of a backup 3 in Orlando, and speaking of 3, he proved he's a 3-level scorer at Illinois. We already knew that this guy got to the rim with authority, and of course that didn't change once he was playing in Illinois. What did change for Shannon was his shooting from deep. This year, he showcased consistent scoring on that end, which led him to being arguably one of the best offensive players in the country. His flaws are probably his defense, but I still think it's solid. He has tenacity. He's a much older prospect, so that's going to be an issue. But what's really holding him back, unfortunately, is some stuff that's happening off the court. They're incredibly serious charges, and I would not be surprised if that holds him back from going earlier in this draft. And obviously, the Magic or any other team would have to take that into account. But based on the value that he provides to the team on the court, I think this is the range where he could likely go. So we'll see how that shapes up closer to draft day. At number 19, I have the Toronto Raptors selecting Zach Edey out of Purdue. Zach Edey just seems to be a cultural phenomenon. Look at any ESPN comment section, they're telling you that this guy should be working at Burger King. Look at the comments on my last mock, some of you guys were saying he should go number 1. I don't get it. But you ask me, I think this 20 range is about right. And why not bring him back home to Canada as well? With Edey's size, I don't expect his offensive interior ability or his rebounding to fall off anytime soon. And even in the modern NBA, which plays a lot different, having a hub around the rim like Zach Edey will be incredibly valuable on either side of the ball. Obviously, you don't look at Edey to change the game on the perimeter. He won't. And his size makes him a bit clunky in the pick and roll defense, but for a team like Toronto who could use more size and isn't looking to compete in their current timeline, I don't see why you don't take a shot on Edey and at least find out if he's built for the NBA. At number 20, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers selecting Jalen Tyson out of Cal. Now, Jalen Tyson is a guy whose stock really improved towards the end of the season at California, and mostly just because he's simply built like a successful NBA player. At 6'7" with a large wingspan, Tyson is going to stack up with the NBA's small forwards, and with Cleveland not having any standouts at wing, I think he makes a really good addition to their rotation. Tyson is incredibly strong off ball, he has great footwork, he's great at cutting, especially backdoor, and he's a good shooter. But I do think he needs to be smarter with the ball in his hands in the NBA if he wants to be as versatile as his frame suggests. I think he just needs to be a better ball handler. Cleveland has a lot of choices to make this offseason, but I really like Tyson because no matter what you do with rotation, he can slide in as a 2, a 3, a 4. Hey, honestly, at Cal, a lot of the time he was a big 1. He can do a lot of things. I just think he needs to refine his game, and I picked number 20 for Cleveland. I think you like the upside there. At number 21, I have the New Orleans Pelicans selecting Yves Missi out of Baylor. I would not be surprised if Jonas Valanciunas does not make it through the summer in New Orleans, and that gives me the perfect opportunity to give the Pelicans one of my favorite bigs in the whole class. This dude Missi is legit. In the pick and roll, under the rim on both sides, and just the overall tenacity that this guy plays with, I think someone is going to take a shot on him. If you haven't heard my comparisons yet, I've been really hot on him becoming a guy like Clint Capella in the future. Like Capella, his deep shooting is not going to be there, and generally I think he could clean up some of his fundamentals on the defensive end to really be that game changer, but at 21, Missi can be a spark plug off your bench in the way that Derek Lively was throughout points of his rookie year, but I'm also confident that the young guy can start day one if needed. I am really hot on Yves Missi. He doesn't do a whole lot of versatile things, but the things he does do, he does incredibly well, and I think that's great value for the Pelicans at 21. At number 22, it's the Phoenix Suns, and assuming they actually hold on to this pick, I've been taking Kyle Filipowski out of Duke. If one word describes Filipowski, it's solid. This guy just does a little bit of everything. On offense, he's great inside, he's great outside, and he's great in the mid-range. He's a very solid playmaker for a big, and I honestly like his defensive tools for the most part as well. The question for him is if the transition to the NBA will be smooth, considering he is not an incredible athlete, and he tended to get bullied by the bigger guys at the college level, which we saw when he matched up against DJ Burns. I think there might be problems. Regardless though, the Suns bench is very thin, and being able to bank on a guy who you know can be a contributor this far down the board will be appealing. So assuming the Suns even keep this pick, which as I mentioned, they don't tend to do, I see them going in that direction because Filipowski can at least make some sort of impact day one, even if his potential is not sky high. At number 23, I have the Milwaukee Bucks selecting AJ Mitchell, the guard out of UCSB. AJ Mitchell was so impressive at the Combine. I think he's the guy that might have raised his stock the most. Not only just for his physicals, but he really shined in that 5-on-5 action. He does not have the smoothest jumper, but he's incredibly impressive because of his elite playmaking, despite him probably being more of an off-ball player at the 2 spot, and he has the footwork to match that as well. Mitchell is still putting on weight and getting into a bigger frame, so he's getting more comfortable. And the young guard from Belgium has a lot of potential that the Bucks could really tap into if they use pick number 23 on him. I really like his potential. I know he wasn't the most impressive, and some will point to him playing ball at UCSB as a downside, but I really like this guy, and I think the Combine showed that when he matches up against some of the best young talent in the league, he's going to be right towards the top, so I love the value for Milwaukee. I just hope they find ways to get him on the court. The Knicks pick back-to-back with pick number 24 and 25, so with the 24th overall pick, I have them taking Tristan da Silva out of Colorado. If you like Josh Hart as a Knicks fan, I think Tristan da Silva might make you fall in love. This guy has an incredibly strong build, he plays great perimeter defense, and he can shoot from all over the floor. There's really not a consistent downside on his game. You look at him as a prospect and he is a little bit older, but he provides everything that you could want from a guy this far down the board. I don't think he has that elite level upside necessarily, but I think for a team like the Knicks, who is probably looking to make another finals run next season, he fits the mold of a guy that you can run all game. He can eat up a ton of minutes, which he did at Colorado, and he is a natural leader for a young guy. Knicks fans are falling in love with this guy. He's getting mocked here a lot, and I just think it's the perfect fit for a guy like Tom Thibodeau, who likes to run these young guys like he does with a guy like Deuce McBride. And at 25, I have the New York Knicks selecting Carlton Bub Carrington out of Pitt. Now, this guy is a true point guard, and he is a deep shooter. We see a lot of comparisons to a guy like Bones Highland, which might not be the highest praise, but I think with his skinny frame and his ability to pull up on any spot of the floor, it's more of a compliment. What I like about Bub is his high IQ, but you do worry about him being so slim and his defense not really being there. Carrington is going to be a bit of a project player, but his offense is already at the level where you expect for a top 10 sort of guy. You just got to get him to either bulk up or find ways to be a little bit more efficient on defense, and if you can do so, this guy's going to be incredible. At number 26, I have the Washington Wizards selecting Baylor Scheierman, who I believe is one of the oldest players that we may ever see go in the first round. For a guy with age being a problem such as that, you wonder why he would possibly go first round, and I'm going to tell you for free, it's because he is that good. You saw it in the March Madness run. From deep, this guy can catch fire in a blink of an eye, and that's an incredible asset to have on your offense, but also you got to play him honest because he's beating dudes off the dribble, and he has the size and the creativity around the rim to be efficient in the close range. His defense is there. I don't think he's the fastest with his foot speed, but he has a strong build which makes guards have problems trying to get by him. You have to look at the age, and I know that's obviously going to be a big knock, and for the Wizards, if you're going to take him, it has to be with the idea of playing him as soon as possible, because you can't let a guy like that rot in the G League. But he has all the tools, he has all the talent, you don't have to worry about developing a guy like that, and as I mentioned, in a class that's weak like this, you look for guys that are actually going to contribute to your team. I think Baylor Scheierman is one of those guys. At number 27, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves selecting DaRon Holmes out of Dayton. What more do you want from this guy? He is tall, he has this long frame, and he uses that to be a defensive force at the power forward spot, but because of his shooting ability and honestly, just his pure confidence with the ball in his hands, he might even be able to play a little bit of a 3 in a Kevin Durant sort of frame. Now at Dayton, it took him a little while to catch on, a little long to develop, and you do have to worry a little bit if last year was fluky, but to me, even if so, he caught fire at the right time. This guy is a clutch player, he is strong in the defensive end, and he has a high IQ where it looked like he was always making the right play. I think this far down the board at Minnesota, you take a risk on a guy who may have been a little fluky last year, but I trust can be a consistent part of your team, and if it takes for him to develop in the G League to reach his true potential, I don't think that's a problem because this guy could be one of the more versatile forwards in this whole draft class. At number 28, I have the Denver Nuggets selecting KJ Simpson out of Colorado. Let's keep the Buffs home and have Simpson join the Denver Nuggets. When I look at KJ Simpson, who was another guy that impressed in the Combine, he's a guy that always has his head up and he's getting easy baskets just because he's so quick. He's also a great playmaker. He's a great passer as well. I think he's very solid at hitting that dunker spot, which with a guy like Aaron Gordon in Denver could be a dream come true. Obviously, Jamal Murray is your guard of the future, but at the backup guard position with Reggie Jackson not necessarily being in his prime anymore, and you not really having a whole lot of options there, I think Colin Giuseppe is your next option. I don't like that. I think KJ Simpson is a good fit. Now, he is kind of a smaller guard, and he's not going to beat you in the lane very often. He does have the speed for it, but when he has to go up against those bigger guys, he's not great at finishing around the rim. With that being said, I think his playmaking is a plus. I think his athleticism is a big plus, and I trust his shooting to be at least solid on the perimeter for Denver. For them, you're competing for rings every year. You obviously go out a little bit sad this season, but what you need is to buff that bench up even a little bit stronger, and I think the playmaking of a guy like KJ Simpson could be huge. At number 29, I have the Utah Jazz selecting Nikola Duricic. When you look at him, you see the passing as the first thing. I mean, this guy is a forward with a huge frame at 6'7" with a 6'9" wingspan, but he is a pure playmaker as well. Like we see a lot from these guys that come from overseas. He has great size and fluidity to play guard with that skills that I mentioned, and his shooting I think is pretty solid. He's not a great deep shooter. It's actually one of his weaknesses, but when he steps into shots, I do like his footwork. I do want to point out that his athleticism is not the best either, so he really relies on his frame, but in situations where that comes into play, especially when he has a smaller guy on him, if he's running the 1 or the 2, he backs him straight down to the rim and has a really fun back to the basket game. This guy is a bit of a unicorn, and while his athleticism may be low, this untapped potential that I see from him on any given game makes me think that in the first round, especially a team like Utah that has the ability to play a guy like this, they got to take a shot, because there's just something with this guy that screams NBA contributor. And at 29, I think Utah at least takes a swing on him to put those tools together, be a ridiculous playmaker, maybe work on his three-point shot, just be an impactful forward for a team. I like Nikola a lot. There's just something about this guy that makes me think that he can develop into a real NBA player one day. With the last pick of the first round, I have the Boston Celtics selecting Kaishan George, the small forward / shooting guard out of Miami. When I look at Kaishan George, you're going to look at one thing, and it is his deep shooting. On a Miami team that had guys like Wooga Poplar and Nigel Pack take away some of the scoring opportunities, a guy like Kaishan George emerged as their #1 option on any given game. He has an incredible footwork, he works really well off the ball, and when he has the ball in his hands, I don't think he's a good playmaker. I think he needs to tighten up his handle, but he knows how to get himself open. On a team like the Celtics, which is competing for a championship, a team that honestly doesn't have the strongest bench, you know that you're going to need a three-point shot to stick on this team. With guys like Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser being elite deep shooters who actually have underrated self-creation, I think Kaishan George fits right in, and he can be a young contributor on this team, honestly, from day one with how thin that bench is. The Celtics, they don't need a whole lot, but Kaishan George is an incredible talent, and honestly, at 30, I might be holding on to him a little bit too late. A team is going to look at his huge frame, his great athleticism, and his shot making from deep, and probably swing on him a little earlier, maybe a little bit biased to showing, because I think Kaishan George at 30 would be a steal for Boston. So guys, that's going to wrap up our most recent mock draft over here on Next Man Up. There is so much going on in the basketball world. The NBA Finals are approaching, which means NBA draft season is about to enter full swing. And with teams looking to trade first rounders more than maybe we've ever seen before, expect some new mocks coming a little bit more often. And as I mentioned, we got a big board video coming too, breaking down my top 50 prospects in this class as we stand in this point of the season. If you like this video, we put a lot of work into it, so please leave a like. If you want to see more NBA draft content and basketball content in general, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment if there's any picks you disagreed with. I know my mock had a little bit of differences from the ones you see online from the guys like ESPN or Bleacher Report, so we have some new opinions. Please share them in the comments and let me know what you want to see in the next one. We appreciate you guys so much. Hope you have a great rest of your night. Peace out.